Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Steve Zimmerman. I'm the CEO, founder, and owner of Restaurant Realty Company. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you today to join us in our seventh episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show. We discuss various topics relating to buying and selling restaurants, bars, and clubs, and hopefully we'll provide some helpful information to you so you have a positive experience buying and selling your restaurant, bar, club, other related food service business, or related commercial buildings. Today, our guest host is Giancarlo DiTullio. I had the good fortune of meeting Giancarlo in 2018 through his father, Richard, who is a broker associate at Restaurant Realty. So we have a rather unique situation where we have a father and son members of our team. When I met Giancarlo, I was immediately impressed by his outgoing personality, his passion for the business, and the scope of his hospitality experience for someone of only like 27 years old at that time. So rather than stealing Giancarlo's thunder, I will at this time introduce Giancarlo to you and let him tell you about his background. So Giancarlo, the floor is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, Steve. Everybody who's joined us here on the panel, and happy to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
Definitely. Yeah, I got a lot of influence from my father as a young man, or a young boy at the time. Kind of always in and out of restaurants. My dad managed a couple pizza places. He owned 2 pizza places before my time. But the conversation about the restaurant was always there. Mainly, my main introduction to what would be the hospitality industry and the restaurant industry is my father was the banquet manager, club manager at the Verde Club off of Harrison and I believe 22nd, 21st. And so as a young boy, he would bring me along when there was events, quinceañeras or high school dances and some of the dinners for the club members. And I would bus tables and walk around and help the guests out if they needed any waters or beverages, small introductory. As I got older, I really got a passion when, joining the Michael Mina group. I was going to college at the time in San Jose State, and I had gone through their hospitality program, great program, by the way. And I got an opportunity to work and help open the new Michael Mina Bourbon Steak and Pub when the 49ers moved from San Francisco down to Santa Clara. And I would say this was really the first itch of inspiration where I got to see not only Michael Mina and his team within the opening process, but how they handled themselves with the training, how much passion the chefs and also the front of house management and the director of operations, the passion that they had around the industry. I had never seen that before. And it really opened my eyes to not only the culinary side, which, different dishes that I've never seen before, different ingredients that I've never seen before. And, that really inspired me. It was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I was there for roughly 4 years as a server role in the beginning, moved my way up into management. And by the end of my time with Michael Mina, I was helping run the tailgates. So the concept, it was a very large concept that they had put on inside this Levi Stadium. And we invited 1,500 people, anywhere from 800 to 1,500 people on game days, all you can eat, all you can drink. And we had different stations throughout this large space. Great experience in terms of fast pace, mise en place, making sure that staffing and organization was in place to be able to execute at that volume. Great experience. It was really the introduction to the passion that I have now for the industry. From there, I moved, followed a couple colleagues and helped open a restaurant in Palo Alto called True Food Kitchen. Another large seat restaurant, about 250 seat restaurant there. And I was part of their opening management team. And I was there for roughly 12, 14 months. That was a great experience. Very, very high volume. I think in their second or third year, they did about 10.5 million in sales and were the leading store in the company in sales. And for those of you who aren't familiar with True Food Kitchen, it's a Sam Fox concept based in Arizona. And Sam Fox has a bunch of amazing concepts. Folks like to talk about his company as a concept generator. And if you go down to Arizona, I would definitely recommend looking up Sam Fox and his restaurants for sure. I think Oprah is an investor now in True Food Kitchen, and the company coupled with Dr. Andrew Weil, who is an anti-inflammatory doctor, to basically create this concept. And then from there, I followed another colleague of mine and a mentor to this day, Antonio. Shout out to Antonio. Who was the GM of Il Fornaio in Palo Alto at the time, and invited me to help him run that store. And again, I feel like that was great experience. I had never worked for a restaurant group that had so many long-term employees. I mean, you're talking maybe 10 front of house and 10 back of house employees that have been there for 10, 15, 20 years. And that says something about a company if you have that many employees, that much staff still working in the same location for so long. And so I was like, okay, that seems like the type of group that I want to work for. And they treated me very well. And I was at the Palo Alto location and the Burlingame location back and forth for roughly 3-4 years there. Antonio ended up leaving to become the food and beverage director at the SAP Center for the Sharks. And I got an opportunity through another colleague of mine to run Bird Dog, which is a fine dining concept in Palo Alto as well. And I was there for roughly 5 months. And then, of course, COVID came around and we had to pivot. And, that led me to being furloughed after 9 months of working there through COVID, and very blessed to have worked that long and them keeping me on board for that long. And upon being furloughed, it was something where my father, we're always on the website, and he's like, let's take a drive to Merced. And so I did, and I fell in love with the restaurant here. And I'm currently sitting in my private dining room. We're open for lunch, and I have a beautiful 7,000 square foot, 250 seat Italian restaurant that I can call my own. And my co-owner and partner in this beautiful life, Anaid, she helps me out dramatically here. Drastically, and we run this place together, and that's where I am now. And throughout the restaurant experience, I've also been with you, Steve, for roughly 3-4 years, just kind of juggling both. It's a beautiful life we live. That's pretty much my experience in a nutshell, without having to talk for 20 minutes about it.
Thank you, Giancarlo. One thing he neglected to mention is the name of his restaurant is called Luna Bella, and it's a very
Bella Luna. Yeah, I guess
Bella Luna. Excuse
I should
me.
be saying
Bella
that.
Luna.
Yeah, Bella Luna. We're located at 350 West Main Street, downtown Merced. No, I know.
Right. Okay. So one of the major reasons I asked Giancarlo to join is because he has the rather unique perspective of not only being an agent at Restaurant Realty, but being currently a restaurant owner. Now, we have a lot of agents that were former, including myself, restaurant owners, but never really were restaurant owners and active and Restaurant Realty agents. So he presents sort of a unique perspective, and can, I'm sure in some of his future remarks, will discuss from an owner's perspective, what is the criteria that they're looking for to find a restaurant broker. But before we get there, I wanted to go through a few questions that actually were prepared by Giancarlo. And the first of which is, what is the difference between hospitality and service? And why is this important?
This is a great question.
You wrote it, so it's got to be great.
It's a great question. I mean, even if I didn't write it, it's something that I hold near and dear to, the way I execute myself and what I preach to my staff and what I have preached to my staff. and everything that I've learned always have come down from those that I've learned from, which is how we all get to where we are. We have mentors and people who have taught us, these things throughout our careers, and it's very important, the difference, but they both need each other, right? So, while they are two different entities, they both do need each other to be successful. And service is basically, I define it as, providing something, being there for someone in a service aspect, right? You might go out to restaurants where, the person who is taking an order, or possibly it's nowadays a terminal, right? They're still providing you a service. They're getting you what you need, which is your meal. And that's fine. A lot of restaurant models are based around that specifically, right? Get in, get out, get what you need, and move on with your day. Whereas hospitality, it's the word feel has to be present. And it's about being warm and courteous, and making the guests feel something, whether it's a connection to the music or the playlist, whether it's a connection to the lighting, a connection to the server taking care of your table. They could tell you a story that you really either inspired you or you could relate to, that made you feel a connection there. Or a dish, right? You have a beautiful pasta dish in front of you, and it reminds you, and you're getting nostalgia of memories of Nona cooking for you when you were a boy or a gal. And those are the great things that I think is so unique to the hospitality industry, is you're able to really draw on all these emotions just going out to eat and having a drink. And that's something where I love to define those two and talk about the differences, but they both do need each other. And my staff do a great job with really running with that philosophy.
Yeah, and needless to say, your background coming up the ranks through the front of the house and exposure to the total operation has given you a lot of empathy, I think, to practice this hospitality and concepts so that your customers really have a very good experience, as a result of your commitment, and I'm sure your employees' commitment to this,
right,
this hospitality.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a joke when I had first came here. It was that word customer. It was something that I was training my staff not to use. It's like they're guests. So it's always, the customer said, nah, it's like they're guests. And that's the way that people come in, and I really want them to feel that they're coming in as though they're guests in your home.
Yes, I agree. A much more palatable label. Okay. So I know that you completed and graduated with a bachelor's degree from San Jose State and majored in hospitality management. How have you found this program to help you in your career?
It's one of those things, where college is always talked about, right? If it's necessary, do you actually take away something from the coursework, especially being in an industry where it's so hands-on, and you really learn more so, within the restaurant industry, working day to day. It really helped me with the networking, right? The connections that the school had with the local hotels, or the connections that the school had with the local restaurants. And then being in class with everybody else who has the same passion as you, whether they wanted to go towards restaurants, or they wanted to go towards hotels, or they wanted to go towards private events. Everybody really had the same passion about people and wanted to do right by people, whether it's in either one of those emphasis. And so I feel like the coursework was one piece to it, yes, but really it was about being in it with other professionals and having the connections to be able to intern at this restaurant or get service hours at this hotel. I think was really, really key to my success in creating a foundation of understanding of what it takes to really be successful in this industry. I think every single professor would start off by saying, okay, well, if you're not going to want to work 12 hours a day, I would suggest, heading to the door and thinking about another career path. And hearing it from every professor, day in and day out, it's like, okay, well, no, I get it. But that was a good foundation and expectation of what was needed to be successful in this industry.
Right. As part of your program, I was fortunate to go to Cornell Hotel School, and we had to do during the summers work experience, not necessarily for pay, just if you got paid, that was fine, but it was a requirement for graduation. Did you have the same requirement?
Yeah, I didn't mention it in my experience, but I was my first I would say real hospitality job was I was a host at when the Casino Matrix opened up in San Jose.
Yeah.
A bar and grill called the Zone 8. And that restaurant was also fairly large, as the casino was extremely large. And so that was my first I was a host there. So I ran the door, and then I eventually ran food to not only the restaurant, but to the casino floor. I think some of my shifts were 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. running food to the casino floor. Yeah. And that was a great experience. But I use those hours as my internship hours while getting paid. So that was something very nice. Right.
So you're a really young guy, early 30s. How did you get to own your own restaurant? How did that come about? And how did you make it happen for yourself?
I was a little bit of luck and being in the right place at the right time. I would consider myself a risk taker, and it's kind of getting off topic, and I'll get back to it. You might have some advisors here and there. I know somebody like my age, they always say, between 20 and 30, 30 and 40 is really the time to take risks, and not to be afraid of those risks. And I think fear really hinders people from going after it. That fear of losing, that fear of not being successful, right? It really would stop somebody from taking that plunge or opening the key to that door, and just getting that out of your mindset. And I think that there are probably a lot of people listening now that either own a restaurant or own two, and want and see the vision of owning a third or owning a second, but something is holding them back. Whether there's so many different circumstances that you would be in that situation. But I think coupled with that piece of kind of putting the fear aside, and then I was really fortunate to have the background and the experience that I have. I don't think I've worked in a restaurant smaller than 200 seats, and so meeting the owner here, he was a big part of the reason why I was able to do it. I know more than anybody throughout COVID. Sellers were a lot more inclined to be the bank per se, right? And we talk about that all the time with either our sellers or our buyers, where rather than going to the bank and getting the amount of money you would need to get into something, the seller would carry a note for you. And I was really fortunate enough to make a good connection with this seller, and he believed in me and my passion, and we were able to come to a term where, honestly, I mean, not to be cliche, but made you a deal he couldn't refuse, in a sense. And so, it was more so then about me, persuading, my partner Anaid, saying, we're good at this. Let's give this a try, and somewhat take a risk. And I'm 18 months into it now, and it's been great, and it was a good investment, and that's kind of how I got into it, coupled with my experience, coupled with putting a little bit of fear behind me. Some people it comes natural, others have to work at it, and that's perfectly fine as well. And having a positive outlook on things, really, and optimism is huge. I have a lot of optimism. Like I said, a lot of these qualities, some people are more naturally able to generate these feelings throughout yourself, and others have to work at it, in a sense.
So how successful is the restaurant, and how stressful is it?
It's managing people is the hardest part. I have 27 employees, and everybody has different personalities, and everybody goes through something different within their personal life. So just managing all the different personalities is the most difficult piece to it. But it's been going great. We took over a restaurant that was established for 25 years and just elevated it a little bit, right? We put in systems that I was able to learn at these previous corporate restaurants, portioning food, steps of service, recipe books, and the staff have ran with it. We have really good staff behind us. I really admire Danny Mayer. And for those of you who might not be familiar, some of you probably heard that name being in the industry, but he's a hospitality guru. And so he has a great book called Setting the Table, which I would recommend for any restaurateur. Would really inspire you about, why you got into this industry and possibly think different about the word hospitality in general and how you can introduce that within, whether it's a quick service restaurant or a full service restaurant. But he says a great quote here, and I have this written down. I think this correlates to what we're talking about. Hospitality is almost impossible to teach, and it's all about hiring the right people. And we've been able to really hire really great hearted people who, you can't teach a great heart, right? You can teach the nuances of service. You can teach wine knowledge. You can teach somebody about food, but difficult in my experience to teach somebody how to have a good heart. So, we have a great team behind us, and, business has been doing good. Friday, we did 265 for dinner, and Saturday we did 275 covers for dinner. So
wow, that's a lot of bodies.
The restaurants jumping, and just really, really blessed and grateful to be in the position that I'm in right now. And I have a vision of having a restaurant group down the line, and we'll see what happens in 5 years.
Sure, be very interesting to track your success. And for those of you that don't know, Danny Meyer is the founder of Shake Shack, and also he's the founder of what's the name of his major restaurant, Union Square in New York City, I believe it is, which is a fine dining restaurant. Sure. Yeah, he had a whole group. Sure. So what's the difference between you and another restaurant locally or within a 60-mile radius of your location? What makes you the difference in your operation and sets you apart from your competitors?
Mm-hmm. It's the people aspect is huge. And I think, I've heard it from others. Merced is a town in the valley, so it's down the 99. It's about 80,000 folks within this town, and definitely smaller than the Bay Area in San Francisco. So people talk, right? And a lot of the restaurant industry folks come in who have worked at other restaurants or been around the industry here, and it's more of an industry, right? When you're coming out of San Francisco, or you're coming in out of the Bay Area or some of these big cities like Los Angeles, New York, the industry is so tight niched, right? You might have GMs that are really good friends at two competing restaurants, but they don't see it as competition. They see it as camaraderie. They see it as how can we collaborate? And so bringing that mindset here where, there are not that many restaurants, but there are that many restaurants. And so, having that sense of cohesion within our industry, I support you, you support me. The more people that come downtown, they drink at your restaurant, that's fantastic. Then they might come and eat at my restaurant, or they eat at my restaurant and they love a dessert that you have at your restaurant. So they walk down the street and they have dessert at your restaurant, right?
Yeah, you were telling me last week about that story about that one restaurant that just opened up in the hotel, and they're trying to get a Michelin star, and that, he came to your restaurant to eat in your restaurant, and he's
absolutely.
He's a competitor 1 block away.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't see it that way as competition. I stay in my lane per se and do what I think is true to myself and to our store and our restaurant. And always reach out. We go eat at we eat all around town, and we go and we visit the local bars and restaurants, and amongst the people per se, and just talking to people, and people can meet me and Annie Eat, and they realize we're regular people just like themselves. But yeah, this new restaurant, Rainbird, is great for not only us, but for Merced in general, and for the Valley. They're located on the downtown street. It's about 4 blocks away from me, and they hired this chef, Quentin Garcia, who coming out of Napa. He has an abundance of experience as well, working in Michelin star kitchens. Another young guy, I think he's 28, 29. They restored a historical hotel here and put this concept on the ground floor, and they're aspiring to get a Michelin star. And my mindset is not that I'm aspiring to get a Michelin star. Here is the conversation around El Capitan and this Rainbird concept. I want to be right there. And connection, again, I come back to the people aspect of it, is we made great connections with some great people at the hotel. And they come in for dinner all the time, and ownership of the hotel comes in for dinner all the time, and just treating these people with kindness, they'll trust me and they'll trust us. So when they have guests, they'll recommend the guests to come over to eat at our restaurant, and you just have good relations. It's very much industry strong. We can do more together than we can individually. And the more good restaurants and bars that are in an area, the more people will want to come to that area to pop around and eat and drink.
Sure, synergism.
I think that's exactly. I think that's really what's made us successful in our mindset. With
the whole thing behind a shopping center and having a mix of different types of restaurants.
Right. And if those restaurants, band together to create an event together, or do promotions within each other, or you can think of all types of things to do together, then it just creates this sense of team. And we've been able to really do that here at Bella Luna, is create a sense of team. My servers don't mind washing dishes because they see me washing dishes, right? I'm not above anybody just because I wear a jacket or I have this title. I don't see myself above everybody, right? I'll stand next to my 16-year-old dishwasher and wash dishes for 30 minutes alongside him or her.
I used to do the same when I was
right.
in the restaurant business.
Yeah. I think there was something that you had mentioned an episode back is something that your father instilled in you, and what made you both very successful is the sense of empathy and how you treated your people. And
Absolutely.
You treated them like people, and you actually cared about them. And I guarantee you had longstanding employees that worked for you, and was able to help you become successful.
Absolutely. People are the most important asset in the business.
No, I think we forget that. I think nowadays we forget that. And when COVID happened, and I believe a lot of kitchens changed their mindsets in that regard. But it's definitely getting back to the basics about why are we here. We're here to serve and show hospitality to guests that come in the front door, and treat your staff well.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
the same. It's the same in what we do in restaurant brokerage. We have to treat everyone well, irrespective of challenges we may have from buyers or sellers or landlords or whomever. But we try as best to be professional and be as positive and helpful as possible, for sure. So that sort of leads into the next question. It's rather unique. You're a restaurant owner operator and also a restaurant broker. So how does being a restaurant owner operator help you become a better restaurant broker?
It was 2019. I hadn't owned a restaurant. I believe I had 22 listings. I've sold about 4, 5, 6, restaurants. So I'm still definitely, the amateur of the group on your team per se, but that's what's great. I still get to learn and absorb everything that you and all of our colleagues go through and all the stories. But now wearing the restaurant hat, I definitely know which questions to ask. I know a lot more about the property within itself. Whereas, you work for these corporate companies, you know how to run the restaurant like an owner, but you're not worried about all of the aspects of the building and the lease
And paying the bills.
and paying, right, paying
Yeah.
the bill, PG&E,
Right. It's a biggie.
right, and being that person that if any, HR, your accounting, you're a counselor at some points, you're a GM at some points, then you wear all the hats of everybody that's in the restaurant. If you have to plug yourself into the front desk, you're a host or a hostess, and so I really feel like I have a much better grasp on the industry as a whole, and what it empathize more so with the fact of being an owner rather than, yes, I've ran multiple stores and know the ins and outs, know how to read P&Ls and financial statements and stuff like that. I also feel, because I kind of did it backwards, whereas most of your agents were previous restaurant owners,
Right.
and then they got into the real estate. I did it backwards, where I started with you.
Right.
And so the training that you've put us through and you put me through, being able to read financial statements, being able to understand lease agreements, I believe that training had prepared me so much more to be a more confident restaurant owner and really understanding the business even better. So, coupling those two things, and I'm still learning, as we all are.
We all learn. Every day is a learning experience.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I know everything by any means, and I love having people around me that are better than me and know more than me, because that just gives me an opportunity to sit and listen and really absorb that knowledge. And we do that. We're going to be doing that for the rest of our life, just like you say, you're still learning.
Absolutely. Every day is learning experience.
Yeah.
So what are the qualities of a good leader that you regularly practice?
Oh, humble, being humble, and being kind. And leading by example. I mean, those three aspects I practice on a daily basis, and I work on a daily basis, right? I think more people should write being kind in their business models and in their business plans, right? Be kind to the contractors that are working for you. Be kind to the person on the phone that you're dealing with. Be kind to your staff. Be kind to just be kind in general. Is something that I believe all leaders should really master, and then be able to teach that to those working underneath you. Being humble is huge, right? It's something that I work on a daily basis. Is making sure that my head doesn't get too big, right? A lot of guests that come in the door, and even at previous restaurants, will tell you how much they enjoyed the food and the ambiance, and that's something that you really get a lot of in front of house, where you don't get so much of is in back of houses. You get the interaction with guests and that consistent, them feeding you positivity or negativity as well, but really channeling that and just being humble and making sure that I stay humble. Like I previously said, just because I wear the jacket doesn't mean I'm not going to wash dishes or, fill in any position that's needed. I'm the owner. I still take tables if need be. So does an Anaid. We jump behind the bar and we'll help, act like a bar back if that's needed, just like support, just being humble and supporting. And then, that leads me into leading by example.
So how do you transmit the positive feedback you get from your customers at the front of the house to the back of the house, which is probably the heart of the operation and really the guts of the operation, and obviously I think the most important part of the operation. Well, it all works together, but again, without a good, solid, consistent food product coming out, how do you keep your back of the house people motivated? And how do you transmit this positive feedback you get from your guests to the back of the house?
I'm still figuring that out. How do you keep them, motivated? It's like what the chefs are back, they always hear the chefs are working, 8 hours, 9, 10, 12-hour days. And then the servers come in, they work for 4 or 5 hours and then they leave, And how do you deal with the inequality of, well, the front of the house people, they get all the praise and they get the tips. And so how do you compensate the back of the house financially? Do you do any sort of tip pooling or tip sharing, or how does that work? Yeah, that's something I'm still figuring out at the moment. and I talk with Anaid, and I talk with my team here, is getting back to how do you feed positivity to the kitchen. I always tell the front of house staff, tell the chefs when something is amazing, right? Let the chefs know that somebody really enjoyed the dish. And we get that feedback a lot, right? My chef makes a beautiful polenta, and she was inspired by the way that her grandfather made this polenta. And so we let the guests know that. And then the guests will, some guests will have a bite, and they'll remember, it'll bring them back to their childhood. And they'll mention that this polenta is even better than my nona's polenta, and this is just bringing me back to my childhood. And something so simple as just relaying that message to the chef will make the chef feel good, hopefully, right? So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of communication with front and back of house. Another piece is that I push my service staff to help the back of house at any point in time. Like I said, my servers don't mind doing dishes. The servers here or the hostesses here, anybody that really works front of house doesn't mind helping out with any back of house tasks, whether that means cleaning, whether that means, restocking their line for them. You'll even see servers in my kitchens where the chef yells pan pickup after all the saute pans, right? The chef, pan pickup, right? The servers will jump around and do that for them. And so that builds the team camaraderie that really is a beautiful thing to see. And I'm really happy about that culture we've been able to create here, is that front and back of house, it's one team, it's not front versus back of house. And that's really important, especially when you're doing the covers that we're doing. And when you're jumping like that, you need everybody to band together. You go into battle with each other.
Sure.
With the whole tip situation, I'm doing a lot of reading right now. All of my kitchen staff get paid quite a bit more per hour than my front of house team does. And I take pride in that. And I would love to pay my kitchen staff more and my employees more, but it's just, we're only open 5 days a week right now. We just for dinner. We're closed Sunday, Monday, and I was just able last week to open up Wednesday for lunch. And that's due to putting the right players in place. I tell guests all the time, why aren't you open 5 days a week for lunch? And I'm not in the business of burning anybody out. You hear about burnout a lot in our industry, and hour shaming a lot in our industry. And I want to move away from that culture. And that's something that I aspire to do with my restaurant group is focus on people first. The people that work for you come first, right? Unison teamwork, no hour shaming, and just being a team together. But I'm reading about it. We get back to Danny Mayer, and he is playing with a model that will work for his restaurants company wide, where the kitchen will get tipped out as well. In what capacity, I'm not sure, but he's working on that, and he's made an announcement about that as well. And I think that's where our industry is moving, is finding a way to compensate the kitchen a little bit more than what they get compensated now. They get free meals. Where the front of house don't get meals, or if they get meals, I do 50%. The kitchen staff, I tell them, I say, my kitchen managers and my head chef and my sous chef, I say, you handle the food cost.
Yeah.
If the food cost gets out of line, then I'll come to you. But you guys cook for your staff, eat whatever you want. Obviously, they're not making steaks and salmon and halibut for themselves, but they can eat what they want. They can cook for their staff. It's not the same with front of house. So that's also something that one of the perks that they get to enjoy as well.
Sure.
And that works out great.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm still learning on how to evolve the model for sure.
Absolutely. Just to shift gears a little bit, we've been doing restaurant transactions for going on 27 years, and up to 2 years ago, although we have sold restaurants in almost every major county in California, we were never able to sell a restaurant in Monterey County. And lo and behold, Giancarlo sold our first restaurant, Carmel Bell in Carmel, about 2.5 years ago. And could you give us a little bit of idea of what added finesse you had to utilize in order to get a deal done in Monterey County? I must add, since you did that first deal in Monterey County, that was an impetus for us to do some volume there. And we've done about another half a dozen deals in Monterey County, but you were the leader and the catalyst for us to do a deal there. So tell us what that the whole experience was about.
Very, very interesting experience, and we'll get into it further. But I do want to shout out, my father Richard as well. I somewhat, when I started with you, had an inside trainer where he was always there to help train me even further than the training I was getting from you and all of your colleagues. And that was whether it would be, questions that I was asked. I wasn't experienced enough to answer certain questions. So I always had, Richard there to assist me with certain questions. But, Carmel's another small city. And so, the restaurant owner trusted me. And it was one of these deals where I didn't meet the seller. I've never met I never met the buyer, and I never met the landlord. And we were able to get this deal done. And I hear stories about, you and all of the experienced agents doing this later in their careers. I was just really lucky that they all knew each other within this small town. And so the seller, upon the conversations that we've had and the Zoom calls that we had, they trusted me. And that's big. Getting a seller's trust is big, and a buyer's trust is big as well. And then even more so, the landlord's trust. And we were able to do that with all three parties. They all knew each other, like I had mentioned. And, we were able to get that deal done, somewhat quickly. And, everybody felt good about it. There was really little hiccups to that deal, which I felt fortunate about, because that was my first deal. And you don't see that very often.
Right.
You don't see that very often. But the buyer knew the seller, their families knew each other, their kids went to school together. The landlord knew the buyer because he had a carpet business in his building. This was a building that had multiple businesses within the one building on the first floor. There was jewelry stores and bakeries. And so he had a carpet restaurant, and his wife had a background in food, and the deal just kind of fell together. It was great.
Cool. So although you haven't done a lot of deals, you've done, a reasonable amount. What was the most difficult deal that you did?
It was Palo Alto, or Mountain View. It's a wine bar. It was called
Savvy. Oh, the wine bar, right, which I had previously.
Savvy Cellars.
Yes.
I think I was working on that deal for a year and a half.
Really?
It was.
Yeah, the town is the landlord. Mountain View is the landlord.
Exactly. So the city owned the building, and so there was just a lot of hoops to jump through with that being that the city was the landlord. They wanted a very much more detailed landlord package. They wanted a much more detailed financial package from the buyer, and they didn't negotiate as landlords do, with being somewhat generous per se with lease extensions and lease terms.
Yeah.
And it was a stock sale. So a couple, stock sale where rather than it being an asset sale or going concern, which we deal with mostly asset sales, it was a stock sale. So we sold her LLC 100% to him. And he knew the liabilities of, if you're taking on the liabilities of her LLC, if there's anything that comes down the pike, now you're going to be responsible for them. And there was a lot more hoops to jump through there as well, as especially with the liquor license transfer. That took some time. I think it was summertime as well, so we had to go through summertime, and because it was a city-owned building, nobody's working during the summer. So there was nobody to talk to for a good 2 months. We had to just basically sit and wait, and we couldn't talk to anybody like it was a normal landlord.
Right.
Maybe the landlord goes on vacation for a week and you can't talk to a landlord for a week, but this was summertime. We had to wait 2-3 months to even communicate with these folks. And then all of the hoops going through it. then we would get to a certain point, and then it was it was Thanksgiving break, and then now the city is away for a week, so we had to wait, and then then right behind that is Christmas, and then New Year's, and that held it up. So it was interesting working with the city-owned building and a stock sale as well, which coupling those two together made it extremely difficult.
Right. Yeah, let me add a few comments about the differentiation between a stock sale and an asset sale. Most of the transactions we do, I'd say 95% plus, are asset sales, where the buyer gets title free and clear. We use a bulk sale process. And one of the big negatives about a stock sale is that the buyer has to inherit the depreciable base. In other words, in a lot of cases, there's not much depreciation left on the seller's side because he's used all the depreciation, and so the buyer cannot set up a new basis for depreciation. And depreciation is a very important concept because it's a paper expense and it allows you to reduce your taxable income. So that is a major factor which impacts value. Additionally, there are contingent liabilities in a stock sale, which means that if you had a problem, the seller had a problem with an employee, let's say, and that problem didn't surface until after the transaction was sold, the corporation is going to be sued. So that means that the new owner of the corporation is going to be sued, as well as the old owner of the corporation. So what that requires is you have to have a substantial enough seller who has assets so that that seller will, indemnify and hold the buyer harmless from that kind of a situation where there's a legal matter which occurs as a result of the operation under the seller's, when the seller owned the business. So those are the two big negatives to it. The positives is you can usually close the deal quicker. On ABC license, you don't have to actually have the license transfer before you close the deal. So that's the positive nature of it. But again, those big negatives of having to inherit the depreciable base and then the unknown contingent liabilities are in more cases than not a real turnoff to the buyer. And so we don't do many of those kind of deals.
Apparently they're doing great, and it's successful now. Well, it was already successful, but the new owners are doing great. And
that's good. Yeah, I know the seller just it just didn't work out for her, which unfortunately, in this business, you have heard, the failure rate for independent non-franchised restaurants is 80% in the first 5 years, unfortunately. But those people that make it can make a very good career out of being in the business, and they develop a passion like Giancarlo has, and so it's nice to have that kind of passion, and that's obviously a big factor which leads to his success. So before we wrap this up, are there any concluding remarks you'd like to make in general? I mean, you've covered a broad base of subjects, but anything else you'd like to discuss?
I would say if you have the inkling and you have the experience, go after it. With getting into the restaurant business, or whatever you might be interested in. Try to refrain from having that fear. Knowing when to take risks and knowing when to jump into something.
Yeah.
Or knowing when to sit back and continue to build so you're ready to jump into something. And that doesn't have to just be the restaurant industry. That could be, any industry. And have good people around you. I think positivity is huge. And I love to have good, positive people around me. And having a team like that really helps me, or could help you be successful in any industry, any profession. Having a really solid group around you that is positive, that stays positive, that doesn't bring you down, and then rid yourself of people that may be like that in your life, and that might be very hard to do. Definitely easier said than done. But even in like the music industry, right? If an artist has a couple core people around them that are positive, that are building them up, that are promoting each other, that are creating this promotion of positivity, that music artist is more likely to do better than another music artist where either they don't have anybody or, they have somebody negative that is jealous per se, right? So that's something huge as well. And
Well, thank you for those words of wisdom. I think I concur with what you've said, very definitely so. So thank you very much for your input.
totally.
Our next Dealmaker Show is going to be on Wednesday, September 28th, and we are going to be featured Jordan Cohn, who's the owner of Brick and Mortar Legal, which is a legal firm headquartered in San Francisco. And they basically, that firm facilitates the success of California businesses in food, beverage, and the hospitality industry. Many of our agents at Restaurant Realty, including myself, have had the experience of working with Jordan on past transactions we have completed. And Jordan will be covering a variety of subjects involving the legal aspects of buying and selling hospitality businesses, transferring ABC licenses, and many other important legal points. So I would recommend you put that on your calendar, Wednesday, September 28th. So anyway, I appreciate all of you that have joined us. And hopefully you've learned something today. And Giancarlo, appreciate your time and your input. Very helpful. And most importantly, everyone stay well. And let's get through the daily grind of the challenges ahead. So again, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.